Well, good morning, everyone. I am Kyra Hardwick. I am the founder of the Smart CEO community. I am also the Chief Master Strategist for the Kyra Company. Excited to have the pleasure to bring to you yet another installment of the Smart Talk Roundtable. Welcome, welcome, welcome to everyone that's here. I'm excited to bring to you three experts in the area of human resources. We're going to talk people, we're going to talk power, we're going to talk purpose today. And so for those of you, if this is your first time, if you're catching this video and you are just absolutely amazed and thrilled that this actually is happening. Yes, there's a table for you. It's open. We've designed this specifically for you. We want you to get what it is that you need so that you understand how to move forward in your career, how to advance as an entrepreneur, and how to think smarter, think bigger, and even maybe find some individuals that you can connect with that will help you think bigger as you grow in life. So I'm excited to bring to you the Smart Talk Roundtable. And for those of you that are live with us, get ready to dig in. This includes you. You're here at the table. We want to hear from you. And so as we move forward, what exactly is a smart talk? If you know me, then you know we do it big all the time. And so our goal here is to let you know that a smart talk is a virtual seat at the table that will change your life. Our goal is to be disruptive at all costs. And so a 2-hour roundtable that is designed with leaders and thinkers that have disrupted their industry in their own right. And we're really here to show you what it's taken to kick in those glass ceilings. So we're here and we want you to dig in as well. Today's Smart Talk, we're focused specifically on these three phenomenal leaders, and we're talking senior leadership, the power and the purpose of it all. And so if you've seen this flyer around, just know whenever you see this, you want to click register, you want to be present, and you want to be in the room. And so today, Laurel Rutledge, Melkeya McDuffie, and Arquella Hargrove are going to bring their greatest to us and share from their seat at the table. So you're going to see some transitions happening and all kinds of good stuff, but I'm going to, at this point, stop my share. We're going to see a full screen, and we're going to see everyone that's in the room with us right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And our dear friend Laurel, as I am going to do her intro, in the world of virtual presentations, I'm going to do her intro and she's going to tee up her presentation. So this is how transitions work, everybody. It's live and it's happening right now in front of your face. All right, here we go. So Laurel Rutledge is the CEO of LaurelRutledge.com, host of the Rutledge Perspective podcast and radio show, and the creator of the Resource Online HR portal for small businesses. With a degree in accounting and an MBA, she speaks the language of business. Combining this education with her multi-industry global experience, Laurel became a trusted senior human resource executive after 30 years in corporate America. She decided to move into entrepreneurship. I'll take a deep breath and pause and say, what were you thinking? What were you thinking?
I don't know.
But where she could broaden her reach to help reach more individuals and companies that meet their objectives. So I want you to meet Laurel Rutledge, VP and Head of Global HR Strategies and Analytics, Vice President and Head of Human Resources, Senior Manager, Enterprise Risk Services. She is an absolute phenomenon. We're about to be taken into the world of Laurel. And so please jot your questions down, fill in on the chat. I'll be here moderating the chat. But Laurel, it's all yours. Take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to you about the priorities. And this is something that you don't think all the time that HR people think about, but we do, that we do think about profit and we do think about people. And so I also want to check my watch because I want to make sure I don't go over time. So we are going to dig into the idea of what the priority is, whether it's profit or it's people. So good. So we'll first talk about what the priority is, and then I really want to dig into kind of the interdependent relationship of people and profit, because we don't always think about that, and then how we connect the two so we serve both of those. And finally, we'll talk about what the bottom line is. So let's jump in. So which one is the priority? So I can't see the chat, but I did figure out how to see your faces. So I'm going to ask you guys first, what's the answer? Which one do you think the priority is? Profit or people?
And I'll monitor the chat so I can share anything that comes up.
Okay. Well, here's the answer, if you've been thinking about it.
People are coming up for us, though.
People? Oh. It's both. It really is both. And People often think that, no, you have to prioritize people, but there's some downsides to that. Or if you prioritize profit, there's some downsides to that. So you really have to think about both of those as interdependent in order to move your business forward. And this is the same whether you are a solopreneur, so it's just you, because it's never really just you, or whether you have teams of 500 to 5,000 people. So it all begins with all of those people you have around you. They're the ones that are going to be helping you put things together and helping you decide where you're going to go and what is the vision, what is the mission, what is the product that is going to happen and going to be a piece of what we're doing to serve the customers that we've decided are our target. And then those people actually do the work. So you've got to have the right people that are in place to be able to execute what you have decided is important for you and for your business. And then you make the thing. Right? So we're going to make, and I just love this because I love the colors, but we're going to make the thing, or we're going to give the service. We are going to be consultants, or we are going to be lawyers or doctors, or we're going to make makeup lines. We're seeing a lot of that now, or we're going to have the widget that is really important. So we've got to have the right people and the right processes that can make the product that's going to be able to serve our customers and deliver the way we want to deliver in a way that is profitable for us. So understanding how all of those pieces put together and what levers we have to pull in order for us to have profit in our business so that we can feed it back into the workflow to improve efficiency, to train our people, all of those kind of things. And so at the end of the day, this cycle continues. You start with the vision and mission, and you get the right people, you make something happen, you sell it, you get profit from it, and you feed it back into your business at some level. And you got to feed it back into you too. We often forget ourselves as leaders, as CEOs, as just mentors. We forget sometimes that all of those profits, when we think about workflow and we think about moving and we think about a priority, we have to prioritize ensuring that we are also feeding ourselves so that we can continue the cycle of bringing on the right people, developing the right people, spreading that kind of knowledge and intent and strength and courage, especially now, so that everyone around us, it's like the ripple effect, each one teach one, so that as we feed ourselves, we can feed others. So it's really both when you think about those priorities. You got to look at both your profit and your people. So let's talk a little bit more about this interdependency challenge. And I'll pause a little bit more this time, Kyra, when I ask this question. So if we think about profit as number one, if you focus on profit first, you can make decisions that have some of the negative people consequences. So my question to you guys is, if you think about that, what are some of the negative people consequences if your first focus or your only focus is profit? And this is so weird.
You can say it in the chat. You can raise your hands. You can let us know what your thought is. Rebecca.
Yeah, you could find yourself not hiring the most qualified people to do the job because you want to pay them less.
There you go. That's a big one. That's a big one. What else?
I could bring up another one. I actually pay myself above industry standard. And so my contractors who teach on my behalf are always more than satisfied and make more room for me. We have more flexibility between us. They trust that I'm taking care of them as well as I'm taking care of me.
Exactly. So almost feeding, it's that counterintuitive piece, right? If I pay too much, it's going to hurt my business. But actually, if you're really paying people and paying them well, it can actually do the opposite, right?
They don't leave. There's no turnover.
Exactly. They're committed.
The key is to remember that without them, I don't eat.
Love that. Exactly. So when you're thinking about profit number one, you got to remember to focus on those negative consequences if you think that money is the only thing. Because number one, not all money is good money. Right? So we have to be careful about the dollars that we're chasing. But the other piece is not only could you lose people because there's turnover that they don't think you're paying them, but you also aren't necessarily investing in them. So even if it's not the base pay or the benefits or the bonuses, if you're not taking money and then investing in people, you have people be stagnant. There's a a quote, I believe it's Richard Branson, that says, or a scenario where he says, what if we train them and they leave? And his response is, but what if you don't and they stay?
Right.
So what are you losing? What is it costing you in profit by not investing in yourself, investing in your business? As Rebecca, I think it is, was saying, I pay myself above industry standard. I take care of my contractors. In turn, they take care of me. Now, at the same time, we also have challenges if we put people first. So what are some of the things that happen if you focus on people that can negatively impact your profit?
I think you could have the raging conversation around bias that happens in that space. So I'll start with that. Yes.
Yes.
I think
Absolutely.
that when you start to take care of people and not trust that they can take care of themselves, you're minimizing their abilities. You're enabling bad behaviors. You're not helping people by doing that.
Right.
It's just wrong all the way around.
That kind of patronizing, right? People can't take care of themselves, so we got to tell them everything to do. We got to make sure we're, taking care of the family kind of thing. What else?
You also don't want to hire the best people in some category that you don't need. Just because they're best in what they do doesn't mean they serve your purpose.
Exactly. And so when we think about the people first, I often talk about this, and I'll say this a little bit in the next slide, which is where we'll spend a little bit more time, which is when you focus on people first and do that above profit, there's often a time when you're going to make decisions that are emotional, as opposed to decisions that may be compassionate or business related. And I know that sounds really weird coming from a business person, but if we're not taking care of the business, we can't take care of people because there won't be a business to hire the people. So if you think about people first, it keeps you from being able to make some of the really tough decisions. It often gives you a chance to think about some bias, right? That kind of enters into, as Kyra said, we're thinking, oh, people first. I'm an A&M grad. If you work for A&M or if you went to A&M, you're the person we're going to hire. Or I really like all of the people that are going to be designers, and I'm going to hire the best designers I can get, which is wonderful. Except that if you spend all your money hiring designers, but you haven't really spent the same effort hiring your marketers or your salespeople or your accountants, then you've put your profits at risk because your focus on the people has been where your bias or where your desire is. So either one of these two things taken in an extreme, whether that's focusing on profit only or that's focusing on people only, can start to ruin or hinder or hamper both of those things. And we often say, those of us who've been in corporate and have started running our own businesses or who are still in corporate, you hear people talking about, oh, that's a marketing-driven organization. Oh, that's a finance-driven organization. Oh, that's a sales-driven organization. And what we mean by those words is the people that impact the decisions happen to be in those functions. So when you see people say, oh, it's a marketing-driven organization, those tend to be organizations that spend lots of money. They tend to spend it on ads. They're out making sure their banners are everywhere. They're promoting their signage on stadiums, marketing-driven, right? Or you'll hear people say, oh, it's finance-driven. Most of the time people mean by that, nobody's spending any money. Because every time you need to do something, you got to go to finance and they're going to say no. Or they're going to make you buy the cheapest thing because that's going to drive profit. So it's the same thing when you look at, am I going to focus on profit as my priority or am I going to focus on people as my priority? So make sure that you're looking at the combination of those two because they are interrelated. All right. So the key thing is to keep your goal in mind. One of the tenets that I always tell people is a good people strategy is based on a good business strategy. So understanding what is your goal? What are we trying to do? Because if you don't know where you're going, how do you know who needs to be on your team? So make sure that you have a lot of clarity, a lot of understanding, and an ability to communicate what that goal is. And every time you make a decision, whether it's a profit decision or a people decision, if you have the goal in mind, even if you have to pivot, you're still moving in the direction of your intended target. And then what is the work that must be done to meet the goal? So as we start to move kind of from that profit piece, why are we in business, over towards the people, the next one is what is the work? So here's where I'm going, but here's the work that has to be done to get there. And often when I had conversations with people, they were like, oh, we got to hire this person. Well, why? Well, because they're just a great person. Okay, but what work are we trying to get done by this person? And often that piece of the conversation was missing. They just really wanted to hire the person. So maybe that's a good thing, but how about we connect it to something that's real so that we can actually meet the goals that we've stated are important to us? Then what skills and abilities are needed to meet the goal? And this is important because still, again, I've not yet talked about individual people yet, especially if I'm talking about maybe moving people within my organization or moving talent or developing talent, really connected to the vision and mission and goal, connected to the work that needs to be done. What are the skills and abilities to do that work? Because I've now not connected my emotions yet. I'm still being very focused on what is my priority so that then I can make the right people decisions. And here's where we get into really looking at your organization and moving that needle a little bit closer to the people side. Do the skills already exist in your organization? So that bias that Kyra talked about earlier, if we are really looking at moving towards a goal, and to get the goal achieved, we have to do that through people, then we are going to take a candid and aware and open look at who we've got in our organization across our organization, and not just look at the functions that we know or the people that we know, but do the skills or abilities exist somewhere in our organization already, where actually from a profit perspective, we may now have taken that money that we would have spent to get somebody and invest in developing it inside, or build that additional reputational bank because we have shown that we are willing to promote and move and develop people internally. And then if they exist, am I using them efficiently? So here's a conversation I literally just had a couple of weeks ago. Someone had a big project they were trying to do, and I started working them through these conversations. And they said, oh, no, we've got the skills and ability. We've got people here. And I said, well, but are you using them efficiently? Have you actually gone to the people and used them and allowed them to take their talents and use those to move towards the goal you want to move towards? Or are you keeping them in that bubble of your vision? Right? You got to open your vision and broaden your perspective, because there may be hidden talents that you haven't tapped into. And if all of those things don't exist, can I spend the money to develop them? Again, what if we don't train them? What if we train them and they leave? Well, what if we don't and they stay? Spend that time developing inside and make that an option before you immediately just go hire people. And if you can't develop them, can I hire them? You know, we all just heard the Wells Fargo CEO this week talk about the challenges with talent. That is a misconception at best. And the reality is, asking where you can hire somebody is a big question. Asking where you can find the talent is a big question. And in order for you to have incredible profit, you want to make sure you have incredible people. And that means that people come from a broad spectrum, across industries, across the nation, across the world, and look for transferable skills. Because just because someone has been in HR, for example, in chemicals, doesn't mean they can't do HR in healthcare. There are skills that are transferable. The same with marketing, the same with accounting, the same with design, the same with engineering. If you think about engineers, the first part of their whole education is how to be an engineer. Then they begin to specialize. So why can't you hire that nuclear engineer in your electrical engineering design firm? Just a thought. And then when you get all of that done, that acquisition strategy is going to impact the bottom line. Where am I going to find them? How much am I going to pay them? As Rebecca was saying, where am I going to put the benefits? Where am I going to put bonuses? All of that impacts your bottom line. So keeping that goal in mind, how am I looking at the mission, understanding the work that needs to be done, making sure I've got the skills and abilities, know where they are and develop them or move them internally, and hire them if I have to. We call it, you want to buy, build, borrow, or bounce talent, right? Or redirect. Buy, build, borrow, or bounce. So get the talent, you hire them, you want to build it from inside. You might need to move somebody out or move them along, redirect, right? Or find that talent. And then as you're keeping the goal in mind, remember not to leave the people behind. So you want to think of people as a conduit through which work is done. We talk about that whole people are our greatest asset, and everyone starts to get sensitive because we're not an asset. Well, we're a conduit, right? We're a conduit to get things done. You have to get things done through people. And clarity is key. I am hiring you because these are the things that need to be done. This is my mission. This is my vision. Do you understand that? Are you committed? Clarity is key. It is not unkind to be clear. And in fact, clarity is comfort. And more so now than ever, is it important for us to be clear with our people, to check in, to help them understand where we're going and why, and what adjustments and pivots we're making in this time that we're in. It's important to be clear. It is not unkind. Compassion and emotion are not the same thing. Remember, I talked about earlier, when we start looking at people, and as I walked you through the process, you only start thinking about people at the end. Because when we get emotional, we make those emotional decisions. Oh, I have to give them a raise because they got all these family things going on, but I don't need to give this other person a raise because they're single. That has nothing to do with what you're trying to do, not only from a business perspective, but also from a talent retention perspective. By being compassionate, you're able to really treat people with dignity and respect, even if you have to make really, really tough decisions. But if you're emotional, that one really hinders your ability to make those tough decisions. I have a lot of people come to me and say, I want to work in HR because I love people. I'm like, then I need you maybe not to consider HR, because you may love people, but you need to be able to make hard decisions sometimes in HR, which means you need to be compassionate, but you also have to be courageous. It is possible to pay people well and still make a profit. Rebecca did it and explained that masterfully, so I wouldn't even go back there. But it's important to remember, you don't have to damage your profit to pay people well. And investing in your people is a driver of profitability. It just is. They are symbiotic. So at the end of the day, oh good, okay, I didn't go over my time. At the end of the day, the bottom line is this: mission first, people always. It is important to understand that you got to know where you're going so that you can have the right people on your team and support them to be there and make sure they understand the mission. So with that, I know it was fast. We only had like 20 minutes and I wanted to make sure there was time for everyone else. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for this. You can find me. I do work with a lot of small businesses on these issues, strategic HR issues, and how to get you where you need to be. The easiest way to find me is on my website, laurelrutledge.com. But I'm also on social media, and we'll be recording this, so you'll see all of that. So, and if it's a career piece, I can help you work through that too. I've done a lot of coaching with people from the plant floor to the executive suite, and I love it. I just don't want anyone else to be in pain. And if you're in a place that's not prioritizing you with the profit, let's talk about that. So with that, I'll stop sharing, Kyra.
Phenomenal job, everyone. Yes, if we could give some virtual, yeah, we're giving the real ones right now. You're getting the real ones over. Phenomenal. And
Can I add something, Laurel?
Yes.
I really appreciate how you brought in the mission, because in talking to other entrepreneurs, what I find is that they talk about their strategies and their goals and their objectives, but they don't match those goals and objectives to their mission. Those goals and objectives are just hanging out here. And without that mission to direct everyone in the same, it's like sailing a boat. If we're not all rowing in the same direction, we can all have different strategies and we're just going to go in circles. So
absolutely.
Thank you for
we got to
bringing
have
that to
coffee.
the front.
Yes, you're welcome. We need to chat. Yes.
I love it when we can speak the language of understanding, and that is exactly what that was. So Rebecca, thank you for even rounding that out.
Yes.
And just giving us such vibrancy in that analogy too. Just when we're thinking about it, you know, Laurel, you did, and I put that in: mission first, people always. I think it's an easy way for us to think about it. And then I also aligned it with the concept of really understanding this is a designed experience. And so I put design thinking in the chat. If you're not familiar with it, get familiar with design thinking, because the method that she shared is the design methodology for actually creating and crafting a role that will serve the mission of the business with the right person to serve the person, to serve the business, to serve the person, to serve the business. I love it. I love it. So Ashley Martin had her hand up, and I wanted her to be able to ask her question, and so does Paula Whitfield. So we're in transition. So our coach is going to tee up her slides. I'm going to do her intro, but Ashley, if you could ask your question, and then Paula, and I'm going to remind everyone that we're going to have a roundtable at the end of this. So we're really talking about it. So Ashley, if you could share, and then Paula, would you share right after Ashley? Oh, no question. Paula said she was saying, yes, I agree. Okay, Ashley Martin, your comment? Okay, maybe Ashley was in agreement as well. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you have another question, just let me know. Okay, no problem. Oh, she said she was just clapping. So Laurel, you have the Amen Corner all in for you. That was phenomenal. But let me introduce you all to our next brilliant mind that's going to share with us today. Arquella Hargrove brings a successful 25 plus years track record of creating and implementing productivity inducing practices through the application of strategic planning and organizational development in both the public and private sectors. She has supported both established organizations and entrepreneurial ventures, advising them through their stages of creation, growth, and stabilization. She helps organizations and business leaders build stronger, more effective teams and companies, valued by providing her clients with a set of principles on workforce development, diversity and inclusion strategies, EEO and company-wide codes of ethics, and policies to build their capacity. Bottom line is, Arquella has been responsible for leading performance management, talent development, succession planning, and learning strategies. In her role leading these efforts for performance management and talent development, the focus was on designing, developing, and advancing the company's performance culture, people, and engagement strategies. I want you to know you are getting another layer and dose of more brilliance concerning people when it comes to leading from the front and understanding the importance of it. Arquella, I'm going to mute. It is your stage. Let's talk about how the biases still reign.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Thank you, Kyra. So I love, like Laurel, engagement. So we will be engaged as we're talking a little bit. This is high level talking about unconscious bias. So the late James Baldwin said it best, that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And so we have so many things that are going on in our country that are very heartbreaking. And so every day, all day, I'm having conversations in regards to unconscious bias, in regards to just diversity, equity, inclusion, where organizations understand that in order for them to advance, in order for them to thrive, it is how do we be more equitable and inclusive? But it first takes us understanding those biases that we all have. And so working from healthcare to education to law enforcement to corporate, this applies to everyone. And so this morning, I just want to give a high level overview of unconscious bias that is still reigns. Heartbroken by what's happening with the Breonna Taylor case. So again, bringing that awareness for all of us just to kind of assess where we are and then what is things that we can do to mitigate some of those biases. So I want to share a little bit of that with you all this morning. Thank you, Kyra. Kyra's provided my background, but definitely do a lot of extensive work on the corporate side, have been in corporate. Now I do consulting and executive coaching, and we're the head of a professor as well. So I want to start off to say, when I hear people go, oh, I don't have any biases, it's like we all have them. We need them to survive. They're how we're wired. And so we think about biases and their impact to individuals and organizations. Just want again to say that you think about our brain, our study shows that we're trying to process in our brains 11 million pieces of data every second. However, we're only able to process probably 40 pieces of that. And so our brain is trying to make these mental shortcuts for us to try to figure out what's happening in the world. How do we navigate? What does that look like and feel like for us? And in that, doing the mental shortcuts, what's happening is that we are relying upon quick thinking. We're going back to automatic associations, things that we were taught growing up, things that we see, unfortunately, in the media, things that we probably have learned in school, and all of those things impact our biases. And so we're trying to make a story, and we don't have all of the parts to the story, right? I like to say that unconscious bias, we're telling ourselves a story about people that we haven't even met yet, or we don't even know yet. Right. And so when we understand what's happening within our brains and we're able to start to manage some of that, then we're able to, again, move about and able to interact and engage at a different level with people. So let's think about bias, right? There's good bias. We have children. It's like, oh my gosh, they're the greatest, right? But then what we're talking about here is those unconscious biases. And I'll share a definition and we'll do a quick exercise, right, to see what's happening within our brain. But we can have, again, the biases that are intentional. It's good to have, right? We need them to survive. But we have those biases that show up that are unintentional, right? Some of the things that we hear probably a witness that's happening because of deep-seated biases that people have, right? And so we want to be in the area where they're more intentional, but we know sometimes things are going to happen where we may say something that's wrong. We may do something that's wrong. And it's okay if we are sincere. It's like, you know what? I'm trying to figure this out, right? We know that's going to come up, but it's not a black or white issue. It is a humanity issue, right? And so we want to make sure that once we are aware, that we do better and we be better. So want to talk about, when we think about unpacking unconscious bias, it impacts our performance, it impacts our relationships, it impacts communication. What I know is once we're able to understand that and how that shows up, we're better able to cultivate the cultures that we thrive and look for within our organizations. But we first have to start the conversation. And I tell people it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so it takes time, but we need to start having the conversations. Although they're difficult, we need to have those conversations around this topic. So let me take you through an exercise. And I want to just, again, think about what's going on in our brain and what happens to all of us all the time. It can happen every day. So I'm showing a guy here. You can unmute yourselves, you can put in the chat. What can you tell me about this guy whose picture is on the screen? What can you tell me about him? Just based on his look, based on what you see in the picture, what can you tell me about him? And you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat and I'll just ask Kyra to share some of the feedback. What can you tell me about him?
He's wearing a suit.
He's got a suit on. Nice tailored suit, possibly. Absolutely. What else can you tell me about him?
He's confident. That's what
he's confident. Yes, he is confident. What else?
He's probably a manager.
Probably a manager. Leading other people. What else can you tell me about him? Just what comes to mind? First thought comes to mind about him.
Smirk almost makes you think arrogant.
Arrogant. He may be considered closed off because his arms are crossed, right? The way, body language. Anything else about him?
Yes,
the white man.
Confident. I think the opposite. I think he's scared.
He's scared. He's a white man. Yeah. Anything else?
Another thing that came to me was, millennial entitlement.
Millennial entitlement. Okay. So now I want you to tell me, has your perspective changed when you see him in the second picture? If so, what has changed for you? Unmute yourself and share. Tell me about your perspective changing.
Well, I know people who do this, who wear a suit and look like that underneath. And so that's not surprising to me.
Okay. It's not a surprise. Maybe he's more artistic, right? Yeah. More approachable, possibly.
More liberal, for sure.
More liberal. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, more liberal.
More liberal. Okay. Anything else? Any other thoughts about this guy? Creative. Yes. Yeah.
This may be his weekend look, or maybe he's just, like you said, creative.
Okay. Weekend look, right? Definitely. There's many things that we can say about him, right? So just based on the pictures, we've made some assumptions about this person, simply based on what? His outward appearance. And so what we don't know about him is, what skills, will he bring to the table, or capabilities or experiences or contributions. We don't know any of that until we have a conversation and engage him in a more deeper level, right? And so what happens to all of us, we sometimes will make an assumption or a judgment based on the way someone looks or how they're dressed or how they sound, and we will make a determination. Do we want to interact with this person or not? And one of the strategies is for us to step outside of our comfort zone and have those conversations, because you will be surprised of what you will find out about people. I like to say that a lot of times we're more alike than we are different. And so we don't know that until we have those conversations, but that's what's going on. We make those assumptions. There's a study, it's called the 7-11 rule, that we make in 7 seconds, we make a first impression. And within those 7 seconds, we're making 11 judgments about that person. Maybe it's happening subconsciously, but we're making those judgments. And a lot of times that comes up in those recruitment efforts, right? Where we're making assumptions or judgments about people, whether we're going to engage or not. So just understanding what's going on. I talked a little bit about what's happening within our brains and making those mental shortcuts. A lot of times our biases show up when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're stressed. I've talked to judges and they're like, yeah, if they're stressed, hungry, and tired, they sometimes will put out those harsher sentences. And so when we understand what's happening within our brain, how do we counteract that? And a lot of times it's taking those strategies and putting them into play, those reinforcements, finding an accountability partner. So those are things that we can definitely take interest in, as well as taking the implicit association test. It's free. It was a test developed by Harvard and a couple other universities, where you can go out and you can test and see where you may have biases as it relates to education, where it relates to gender or race, ethnicity, many things, weight, and see where there may be bias, right? And then set an action for yourself. Again, it's all about awareness. It's not to say that we're bad. It's just that's what's happening within us, right? So what is bias? So I have 2 definitions, and then I want to just take maybe from a couple of you, maybe what a bias that you may have or you've experienced. So explicit is attitudes and beliefs we have about a person or group. It's at the conscious level. And I share an experience. I do a lot of travel. I was traveling quite a bit last April, and was in Silicon Valley, California. And I was exhausted. I was in the back of my Uber, and a car almost hit the Uber driver. And he yelled out, "Those Asian people." I was like, "What did you say?" And he's like, "Well, they can't drive." And he sped up to see who was driving. And I said, "That's really not appropriate." And of course, he's like chimed me out, but that was explicit, right? It was out there. And it could be based on experience, many things, but that is an example of explicit. Unconscious, those unintended, subtle, and subconscious thoughts that that happen to all of us all the time, right? It could be, I have people that say, I have bias against people with tattoos. And I always say, why? Right? Because they think they have a different lifestyle or whatever it may be. I've had people have bias against people who drive a certain car or live in a certain area. A bias is a preference for or against a person, place, or thing, right? So I've heard it all when you think about biases. Even people bias against people with weight issues. And it's like, why? Oh, they may not be disciplined enough, right? So when I'm working with leaders to understand their biases and make those awareness, because it impacts decision-making, how do we be aware? And then what are some things that we can do to make sure it's not adversely impacting an individual? And unconscious bias, an example that I use in my area here in the Houston area, we have trails. I go out, I run, and I walk. And lately, of course, with everyone quarantined, all types of families are out walking. But I'm noticing a couple of times a woman, she has black slacks on and a black top, and she's carrying a black tote bag. And I automatically made an assumption about her. Like, who wears black slacks and a black top and carries a tote bag to walk or run? And is she going to do something? Is something in her bag where she's going to harm people? I immediately made that assumption about her, even though I had saw the woman many times in the community. And in that moment, I had to stop and check my own assumptions. Why am I thinking that? She's not going to do anything. She lives in this community, and give her the benefit of the doubt. That is how quickly somebody said, those biases are sneaky. They are, because that's how quickly I made that assumption about her, because of the way she looked, because she looked suspicious by carrying a bag, right? And so when that happens, sometimes again, when we understand those strategies, we're able to stop ourselves in that moment. So I want to ask, anyone want to share what may be a bias that maybe you have experienced or even witnessed? We can take a couple. Any thoughts? Anyone want to share? I know we're being recorded.
I have biases when it comes to music.
Okay. Okay.
I
What
don't
type of
like,
music?
I studied classical music, and so I'm very particular about music and things that are not asynchronous and harmonic. Put me off. That's all. So, what can I say?
That's
I'm not saying they're not art.
Yeah.
They don't appeal to me.
Thank you for sharing, Rebecca.
Can I ask a question again to get to that? That's interesting. So when you think about that, does that mean if someone was to say, if I was to say, hey, Rebecca, what's your recommendation for, a concert or a great experience? Would you then have a bias against that artist or an artist that's not in that genre?
I think there was a rap artist that's on the cover of a magazine today as an influential person, and I was reading about it. She's not influential to me. That was my thought. That doesn't make her less influential to the world, but I have to watch my biases too, which is, why is she influential? What is she bringing to the table? What does she offer? Am I missing something? So I read about it, but then I get to decide whether it's right for me or not. So I think we have to be careful to not throw out our biases, because you're allowed to have some.
Absolutely.
That's how we live. I don't like jalapenos. We're allowed to have likes and dislikes. I don't think we're allowed to impose them on other people and make whatever. I think you're right, but recognizing your bias is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't say we're bad. It's just once we are aware, then what do we make sure, again, we are recognizing how we interact and engage with people, because we all have different identities. Think about our lifestyles. We think about our education, our tenure in our organizations, or what we do. All of that plays a part, but it's understanding that, and then again making sure, again, at least you did read about the artist,
right? And I don't have to denigrate her contributions because I don't like her music. Her contributions can still be very valuable to lots of people.
Absolutely.
And not
thank you.
Me.
Thank you, Paula.
It's interesting because I think your biases come from who you interact with. Consistently, because, I've been in corporate most of my life, and now I own a drug testing franchise. So I interact with the people. And so a lot of biases that I may have about certain people have really gone away because I interact with, from the executive that's coming in here to do his monthly drug test for, what have you, to the parolee that's coming in here and, hey, Miss Paula, I'm doing better. So I think a lot of the biases just depend on the circle of people that you interact with. It changes over time. Because people that I may have made certain assumptions about, like the little, guy coming in here, scruffy looking, I may have made an assumption about him, and it may not have been true. And he's like the nicest little guy, would not, dare steal or what have you from me. But it's because I'm starting to have those interactions with people that I may not have interacted with before.
Yes. Thank you, Paula. And that's one of the strategies, is that we have to engage and step outside of our comfort zone to get to know people who may be different from us. And then two, when we see things within the media, a lot of times if we have these relationships and we know people, then a lot of times when we see things, it's like, you know what, I know that not to be true because I have a relationship, right? I can say I'm married to my husband of 29 years. We're raising a man who's 20 in college, and men in my family, I know Black men to be smart and courageous and brave and all of this. So when I see things on the news, I know a lot of that not to be true, right? And so that's how we are able to engage and shift the mindset in regards to individuals or groups, right?
Paula, can I bring your attention to Prashama? She has her hand raised, and before you go on, I wanted to make sure we were able to get her as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But I just wanted to provide an example of, when we're talking about the explicit biases, I remember, just for me growing up, just my name alone, I would just get so many, just growing up, Prashama, and I would get all the nicknames. But as I got older, and especially as an adult and working in corporate and working with various individuals and even applying for jobs, shortly after 9/11, it shifted just from being an African American person till then people started looking at, oh, are you Mid-Eastern? Until LinkedIn came about, and I started updating my LinkedIn profile with my picture, because of my name. And then to go a little bit further, when I started traveling more, I always ended up having to go through this whole extra checkpoint, whenever I would go, to travel. And it was just really based off of my name, not anything, just ordinary person, living. And so those were some of the things that I eventually, just because of my first name, because my mother and my father decided to be creative and come up with Prashama. No meaning, but it was just them. And so those are the type of things that we have had to, on an individual basis over a couple years.
Thank you, Prashama, for sharing. Thank you. One of the things too that, when I'm working with organizations around recruitment, and there's issues around diverse, having diverse candidates and the hiring process, sometimes we'll do blind resumes. That way we take the names off of the resumes and we're just showing the hiring manager just that person's qualifications, right? We want them to make the decision based on the qualifications, not on someone's name, because a lot of times they'll pass that person up. Or it is making sure we have those diverse panels who are interviewing to ensure, again, that we do have that diversity within a candidate slate and to ultimately be hired. So thank you for that. Just again, I know my time is winding, but there are over 150 different biases that show up every day. And these are just a few. There's affinity bias. It's the like me. Oh my gosh, we went to the same school. You're good. You're in. There's confirmation bias, where we have these pre-existing beliefs and assumptions. And so we will sometimes say that, oh, this is not going to work. We've already tried it. Why are we going to try it again? So we will have these pre-existing beliefs or assumptions that we're making that are not true or not valid. So those are things too to think about. Also, unfortunately, we still see a lot of gender bias and age bias that's going on every day. And so again, it's really creating that awareness around what's happening and then how we can move forward to make sure we do have those equitable and inclusive environments. A couple of stats I wanted to share is that those who perceive bias within their organizations will leave or they will be disengaged and check out, right? And so I like to have this conversation with leaders because it's like, we need to make sure we're aware of what's happening and create that awareness so we can do better by our employees. Couple of things to take away for today is those ways that we can mitigate bias. One, I shared, question our assumptions. Why am I thinking this way? Also, taking the risk and stepping outside of our comfort zone. I love Paula's example that we have to get to know people. We have to put ourselves in those circles where, again, it can, take away those stereotypical myths. A lot of times that show up for some of us. It is speaking out, it is holding ourselves and others accountable and having those conversations. If we're in an organization, it is being vocal, it is being a champion around diversity and inclusion, it is being an ally and staying committed. So when we see something or hear something, how can we be that upstander and push back respectfully and ask those questions so we can all, again, be better around this area. Last quote from The Hidden Brain. It's a great podcast, great read, is that good people are not those who lack flaws. The brave are not those who feel no fear. And the generous are not those who never feel selfish. Extraordinary people are not extraordinary because they are invulnerable to unconscious biases. They are extraordinary because they choose to do something about it. And so I just want to thank you all for being on the call today and taking time to, again, share and engage in this short overview of unconscious bias, because it still reigns, but definitely we can be more aware to find out what our next steps are going to be. So I wanted to share my my contact information, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm a resource as I work with organizations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. As I said earlier, I do a lot of these unconscious bias and inclusive leadership sessions, and Kyra has been gracious where she's been like stepped in and to help co-facilitate some of those experiences. So looking forward to seeing you all soon, and thank you all for engaging with me. Thank you, Kyra, as well.
Phenomenal, as always, Arquella. And once again, we are going to just let you know that you fed us divinely, and we're glad that we're at this table. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And now that we have a full screen up, before I transition to Melkeya McDuffie, if you all could go ahead and just snap a picture. You know, social media and media attention is important. Go ahead and snap one and just kind of let folks know that you've stepped into a space that's offering you an opportunity to grow. And so if you're going to take a photo, we're going to smile so that we're all ready. So I just encourage you all to do that with your phones. Just grab a moment, grab your camera and just snap. You know, moments like this are for growing and for sharing. So by all means, take this moment. You know I'm going to do it, and share it as well. But just to let folks know that we decided to make our growing and our learning a priority today. And so you guys look amazing. I'm snapping. And so just want to let you guys know that the next thing I want you to do in the chat, you have an assignment in the chat. So for Laurel, if you could put your top 3 takeaways in the chat, and then do the very same thing for Arquella, your top 3 takeaways. What that does for us, number 1, we're going to save the chat. And number 2, it lets the speakers know that they're hitting home and that points are driving change. And it also helps us understand what you're interested in learning more about and what platforms really serve you. So we want to know you're getting what you need. So if you could go ahead and put that in the chat while we're waiting. And then for everyone that's joined us since the beginning and you hadn't had a chance, we want to know who you are. What do you do? We're not networking like we used to. So this is our networking platform. So we want to connect. Put your information in, your website, what do you do, your next client, your next partner might be in the room. So we want you to take advantage of that opportunity by all means. So don't miss this opportunity to grow with others. Don't miss it. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to prepare the next slide to jump on the screen so that you guys can connect and grow together. All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Melkeya McDuffie, and I'm sorry that I could.
We want her to pause for a moment. Okay. All right. There you go. Bear with me. She's 2 clicks away from speaking, so I have to be careful with my clicks because I want to properly introduce her. All right. So thank you all for putting the information in the chat. We're excited that you did that. And let me just share with you, Melkeya McDuffie is an award-winning, nationally recognized thought leader, author, speaker, and senior human resource executive who has successfully led Fortune 500 HR teams across a variety of industries. Melkeya has more than 20 years of career experience in human resources, recognized multiple times as an HR superstar and leader of distinction by HRO Magazine, one of the most powerful business women in Texas by the National Diversity Council, and Women of Wonder by the International Association of Women, and recognized as one of the 2020 influential African American businesswomen you should follow on LinkedIn. Melkeya is very passionate about harnessing her career experiences and successes to help businesses to exceed their strategic objectives and individual ones as well to maximize their career potential. As an undergrad, Melkeya studied human resource management at Trinity College after completing her undergrad studies, and then went on to study employee relations at Cornell University Strategic Business Leadership at the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business and Organizational Effectiveness at Harvard University. Melkeya has just completed her global MBA coursework at York St. John University in York, England. She is putting in the work in her industry to master the craft And for all of us that have done similar, I want us to take a moment to dig into this conversation. She was so kind to take her time and really respond to my request. So let's talk about the future of talent. Because as we know it today, talent will never look the way it did before. So we're going to listen and watch and follow on as Melkeya shares with us.
There.
All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Melkeya McDuffie, and I'm sorry that I could not present this to you live, but I will provide my contact information at the end of the presentation, where you're welcome to send any questions or any comments that you have regarding the presentation today. So a little bit about me. I've served as an HR executive at large Fortune 500 organizations across a variety of industries. And I will tell you, in my 20 plus years as an HR executive, I've seen a lot, but none of it has prepared me for COVID-19. And when the coronavirus hit our world, it completely upended it. And the world that we knew prior to March of 2020 is never going to be the same. So my aim is not to sound ominous, because while the events of this year will forever change us, it'll change business models, it'll change employer and employee expectations. It's also ripe with opportunity for innovation, diversity, and growth. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, what those opportunities are and what the talent implications in a post-COVID world look like. There are common phrases that are used today. You hear a lot about the future of work, and particularly in our current COVID climate, you hear a lot about the new normal, and you hear people say often, we need to pivot. And the future of work
We can't hear anything.
change. So
Yeah,
to gather
can't-
perspectives
It's
on
back.
what the new world of work might look like, Lars Schmidt, who's an author, he's a talent thought leader, and he's also the founder of Amplify, which is an HR executive search and consulting firm. He created something called the Reimagining Work Idea Board, to which dozens of the best and most innovative minds in the HR space have contributed their visions or upvoted their favorite ideas on what they felt the future of talent held. So as opposed to reinventing the wheel, I thought I would share with you here today some of the most compelling ideas that came out of that research. So I'm going to take time to walk you through 6 predictions that I found personally to be accurate, provocative, and compelling. So the future of talent, prediction number 1. Companies will make substantial investments in remote work technology and employee well-being. Companies are going to quickly embrace remote work as a long-term operating priority rather than just a short-term contingency plan. A handful of businesses, most notably Twitter and Facebook, have already made work from home a permanent option for some or all of their workforce. And I think many others will follow, in kind. Remote or hybrid working solutions are going to save companies significant money on real estate. It's going to save them significant money on travel. And businesses are going to reinvest those savings in technology and programs that support employees' mental health and well-being. Companies will also ensure that their employees have access to the technology that they need, such as laptops, monitors, keyboards, headsets, video conferencing platforms, chat tools, and document collaboration tools that are going to be needed for them to work productively in a remote environment. Also, these tools are going to be necessary to keep them every bit as engaged and connected as their colleagues who are working on site. And to further support engagement in overall employee well-being, mental health and wellness is going to be a core benefit that companies are going to be looking to offer. You know, contemporary companies probably will look to offer things like meditation apps, online exercise and well-being classes, more flexibility and time off. They're going to be encouraging employees to unplug at the end of the day and make sure that there's some division between their work and at home lives, even if they're happening in the same place. And so we've heard throughout our careers this notion of work-life balance. Now we're managing work-life integration and making sure that there is a healthy balance between the two. So future of talent prediction number 2. There will be a widespread adoption of distributed work, and that is going to be an opportunity for companies to nudge their diversity efforts forward. And so as working from home becomes the new norm, there are going to be both opportunities and challenges that are going to arise. And one of the opportunities is going to be the ability to recruit a more diverse workforce. And Brendan Brown, who is actually the global head of talent acquisition for LinkedIn, said one of the biggest upsides of a remote working world is that you can recruit and hire awesome talent wherever they are. And I could not agree with that statement more. You know, think about the implications for high tech, like Silicon Valley as an example. It has about 3.1 million residents, but of those 3.1 million, only 3% are Black. And so for years, HR teams have tried to convince executive teams to open offices in cities with vastly more diverse populations, but that can be challenging. You know, there are high costs associated with it. There are long timelines for implementation. The competition is high, but now that energy can shift to sourcing and nurturing and recruiting incredible people where they live. You know, remote work won't be a panacea for companies who have struggled in the past to get traction with their diversity efforts, but the total addressable market explodes when businesses can look everywhere for their next hire rather than just relying on the talent that lives in their target geography. So there is a huge opportunity here for us to increase diversity in our organization. Future of talent prediction number 3, you know, there will be more and more companies who are going to be looking to offer on-site childcare, or they're going to be looking to underwrite childcare expenses. And while it might seem counterintuitive to suggest that the new norm for companies will be to support childcare, given that more people will likely be working from home, however, there will remain a contingency of roles that still will require an on-site presence. And those people are going to require safe, affordable childcare. And we're seeing that trend emerge with companies such as Patagonia. And Patagonia is an outdoor sports and clothing retailer. And they offer subsidized childcare at 3 of their facilities. And their head of HR stated that the turnover for parents who have children in their on-site childcare program is actually 25% lower than what they're seeing in their other locations. So the lockdowns that have shuttered businesses in so many countries, they are not sparing childcare providers. You know, some of whom will not open or reopen for business when the parents start looking to return to the office. And there's a belief that there will be a second childcare crisis that's coming, and employers are going to need to implement solutions to be able to address and respond to that. Not only will there be fewer care options, but those remaining options, they might be too expensive for many employees. You know, annual childcare in the US can cost more than 1 year of public college. And between furloughs and pay cuts, many employees they have fewer resources with which to tackle that issue. And so as a stopgap measure, a number of companies like CVS Health, you know, Ally Financial is another one, Target is another one. they've all rolled out new and expanded childcare packages that offer employees 20 to 30 days off of paid care for each of their employees. The future of talent prediction number 4, the workplace design is going to get a massive overhaul. And we've started to see a lot of employers moving toward these open workspaces. And so, the post-COVID workspace, while not necessarily provocative, is going to be anything but business as usual. The speculation about what it will entail really, varies. It runs the gamut. Suggestions range from voice-activated elevators to sneeze guards at every desk, windows that you can actually open, having more outdoor gathering spaces, and having fewer conference rooms where people are congregated in close quarters. And everyone seems to agree that, air filtration systems are going to be greatly improved by incorporating more fresh air rather than recirculating stale air. Technology is going to be a huge driver of the new office. And to make the future workspaces as touchless as possible, companies are going to allow employees to control doors, lighting, audiovisual equipment, coffee makers, all with their smartphones or with their voices. According to Fast Company, businesses are going to be deploying beacons to track employee movement via their phones. So if they feel like employees are getting too close, the beacons are going to actually beep as a way to encourage employees to keep their social distance. Prediction number 5 is that the work will be based on projects rather than roles. So workers in many roles across industries have had to drop what they've been doing to take on work that they've never tackled before. So, from librarians who are now serving as COVID-19 tracers to distillers who are now producing hand sanitizer as opposed to alcohol, to assembly line workers who are turning their skills from cars to making ventilators. Many businesses have seen some of their portfolio dry up, while at the same time, they're finding themselves engaging in new and emerging lines of businesses, and they've shifted their employee resources to do that work that now supports these new emerging business needs. And Accenture foresees what it calls the liquid workforce, which is essentially a blended group of full-time workers or freelancers or contractors or consultants who have the ability to work anywhere, anytime on projects of varying length. And so integrating that liquid workforce is going to bring fresh and diverse perspectives to companies and add new energy and add new ideas. Prediction number 6. Companies will develop internal career coaches to support nimble teams. So imagine a world of work that focuses on projects rather than roles. So what would happen if companies develop coaches who work with teams to see what opportunities beckon them and to ensure that they continue to develop in-demand skills? Lars Schmidt contemplated the idea of creating internal career coaches who proactively track the acquired skills, capabilities, and interests of a team to deploy them to different projects as they're needed, rather than keeping people locked into rigid, predefined jobs or roles, or keeping them locked into specific teams. So in the past, most companies that have engaged career coaches, they've done so to help with leadership development. But Google, launched its hugely successful Career Guru program about 10 years ago. And while that program certainly had elements of leadership development baked into it, it could also provide the opportunity for Googlers to call on gurus for help with presentations, sales pitches, team development, innovation, well-being initiatives, building a program that provided coaching to frontline employees and that helped them to move into different jobs was really a truly positive example of innovation. And internal career coaches assigned to teams will be a win for everybody. You know, for companies, it will allow them to attract and retain talent, to fill skill gaps and increase agility, deploy proven work-ready teams to projects that are most critical. For employees, it's going to help them keep their skills and their focus fresh, and it's going to ensure that they are attaching themselves to projects that are meaningful. So I want to leave you with some final thoughts. Some of the ideas that I've shared from the Reimagining document come from Lars, and some of them don't, but all 6 of the ideas shared have one feature. Each of them, if done right, would be an absolute win-win, bringing benefits to both the companies and the workforces that embrace them. And in these insights, there are opportunities to be leveraged by employers, by employees, by executive coaches. If you are a tech guru, a mental or physical healthcare practitioner, or if you're just an innovative business owner, this is the time for you to reimagine your business and ensuring that your business model is evolving and iterating as needed. I'll leave you with this final point by Lars. This collision of global circumstances from COVID-19 to Black Lives Matter and racial inequity is a once in a generation opportunity for people who lead people or who work with people to drive change at scale. So follow the examples set by people teams that have been leading the way and operating in this progressive space. The inspiration and examples are there for you. Work out loud, share with your peers, collaborate. We are all in this together, and now is our time to build the future of work. Thank you.
Wow, 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 wow. Let's go ahead and just let Melkeya know exactly what we thought about that. I don't know about you, but I was over here taking copious notes, and I am full, because I think one of the things I saw immediately, and we're going into our roundtable, is that there were immediate gaps I identified where I needed to be progressive. And so I wrote myself a note, as I do most times. You need to be more progressive in this space and think differently about some of the approaches to the workspace. And I consider myself to be pretty agile when it comes to what's coming and staying in front of or anticipating the next. But I'm thinking that we can all identify some opportunities based on those 6 predictions. And not only that, but then thinking about how that relates to us. What's our disposition in the workplace, whether we're in a formal corporate environment or we've created an entrepreneurial space for us to occupy, whatever that is, or the duality of both. And so I am going to, we're getting into the roundtable conversation. So this is now our time to shine. So we're going to definitely make sure Arquella and Laurel, you're ready for some direct questions. I'm going to tee up a couple of statements, and this is our time to have the discussion. We want to hear from you all. So we're going to use the raise hand function that you will find in your commands, either at the top or the bottom of your screen. I'm not sure where yours are. And it's under the reactions, and it looks like this at times. And if you wanted to agree with someone, you could definitely use your thumbs up. And perhaps someone said something that was absolutely hilarious. Let us know how much you're falling out of your seat, or you just love it and it resonated. So if you can all just use your commands if you're able, and just let us know you can do it. Put one up, and we want to see that we are going to be able to use those commands as we go through this conversation. Love thumbs up. See it. I see it. I see it. I see it. We've got some folks that are on the phone, but if you, okay, I see it. Good. Very good. Okay, perfect. That's going to keep us from having those jump in moments where we're like talking over each other, because we want to be able to hear everything during the recording. And thank you all for letting me know you couldn't hear. My goal was to mute my background because I have middle school and high school going on in my house at the very same time. And at times those individuals choose to have lunch or snack, and then they may move through my area, which is fairly open. And so I was trying to guard my space, but I didn't do a good job. And so I just want to let you guys know that in this full conundrum of life we're in right now, it is all real. And so I have sent them notifications that I call it, I'm super live, and so they know to be mouse quiet. So we're good now. So in that, let me just tee this up. So Laurel, I mean, I have pages right here. So I'm going to just tee it up with you with the first question that I really want to send in your direction. And it's really, you really highlighting the idea that interdependency is the relationship that people in profit share. So I want to pose that to you as a question and just say, Laurel, when you realize that, like, give us an idea or a scenario that you were in where you had to really make that decision and or drive the necessity of that decision home to a leader that just couldn't get it. So give us an understanding on that.
Wow. You know, because this came to me pretty early. You know, I'd been doing this a long time and really working with people and senior level people. And I think it hit me probably when I was working with a board and we were talking about a big project that was happening. And in the project, there's always a project budget, right? And this happened to be an acquisition. So there's always a project budget. And the HR piece of these acquisitions always is the last thing they think about, when the reality is, if you don't think about the HR stuff, that can actually cost you more money in the deal. They don't think that way. They think about the sales, they think about everything else. And so in this particular deal, I was looking at the contracts and I said, and you know, the legal had looked at it, everybody looked at it, but I went and looked at the contracts. We happened to be buying an organization that was going to have some sales with it. And I said, so do you realize that not all of them have non-competes? So that's number one. But the ones that do have non-competes, there's clauses in the non-competes that say if we try to enforce them, it's going to cost us lots of money to enforce them. And no one had looked at that. No one had looked at that. The lawyers hadn't looked, nobody had looked at it. And so I'm HR. So I come back and I said, so here's the thing. One, we have to get these involved, because if we don't have this and we're buying this, it's all relationships, we lose the business. That value, what you just paid for, is gone immediately. So that whole profit thing, right? People in profit. So it first hit me right there in an acquisition perspective that said, HR tends to be the last thing that people think about, but it is the thing that can be the most impactful to profit, right? And to movement and to mission. Because if you don't do the right thing with the people, you're not going to have anybody to do the stuff you want to get done anyway. And vice versa. If you don't do something right by the business, you're not going to have a business to bring people into. So you cannot do them separately. You cannot do them separately. And so HR people, we have to be courageous when we see those things to say something. And leaders have to be okay with understanding that I've got to think about my people just like I'm thinking about the mission. So I hope that answered the question.
It did. I'm hoping everyone's head nodding. And if you have any comments, you know, just go ahead and let us know. But I'm going to toss this next one to Arquella. You know, similar to what Laurel kind of stated, I think in my corporate experience, I've had moments where I realized that the CFO thinks that they are God, and then we realize that they've not thought about the people, they've not thought about the consequences, and they're not always the person or the position that's willing to have those crucial conversations either. So Arquella, I want to invite you to this part of the conversation to say, you know, when you've had to face, and we can kind of tag off of what Laurel stated, just kind of having to drive home the idea to a leader, that could be a bias, or you're presenting that with some lean in a direction that you may not even be, you know, realizing. Give us some lifelike examples. I think we just all want to meditate or process how that shows up. And the goal is that we can see ourselves in these scenarios or our experiences so we can make better decisions. So Arquella, what have you faced in that space?
So a couple of, you know, again, I can have, there's tons of examples, unfortunately. So again, when you think about understanding, going back to bias again, is just being aware, because it impacts decisions around performance and promotion and who gets recruited, even who goes to training. I've had people, you know, not be selected for leadership programs because, again, there may have been a bias there. But give two examples. So I had a leader who, the employee, kind of at the same time we were working through unconscious bias and their diversity program, a leader had a particular employee who was making complaints against that leader because the leader was not giving them these stretch assignments. They were treating that employee differently, just their comments, and just it was just not a good thing. And so we talked about bias, and he went out and did some work and did the implicit association test and realized that he had a bias against people who were overweight. And so as we processed right? He
Wow.
was thinking that, oh, this employee is not disciplined enough, right? She's not disciplined because she has a weight issue. She's not going to be disciplined to take care of my stretch project, right? So once he realized that, he was able to make that shift. Because again, it was adversely impacting someone who was typically a star performer. But again, based on his biases and how that impacted decisions, he had to, you know, be aware and recognize what was going on in order for him to make that shift, right? And so that's an example. Or, you know, you have leaders who, you know, have a group now that's oil and gas that, you know, they refer to the women as girls. It's like, they're not girls, right? They're leaders. And, you know, there's over talking, there's interrupting in these meetings. And it's like, we need people who are able to be courageous and stand up and say, you know what, you know, Rebecca has something to say, right? Let's hear from Rebecca, right? So those are things that happen. And when people realize, may not be intentional, may not realize it's happening, but once someone brings it to their awareness, they recognize that, then a lot of times they're able to make those shifts. But again, it's about bringing it, you know, having those crucial conversations in a lot of cases.
It's so important, but you brought up the 7-Eleven rule, and I think we all probably do it at some point. It's all happening to us, and we're doing it at the same time. And Pamela Thompson just said, you know, she said, wow, first. And then she said, you know, some people do have biases against hairstyle, straight.
Oh, yeah.
Curls, not bald, whatever. And we don't know the reason for any of it, right?
Right.
And so when you start to think about just how simple bias can lean one way or the other to our favor or not, that becomes a pretty good challenge. Rebecca, I see your hand.
I also want to make sure that we're clear that biases can sometimes be because a person looks a way that we want them to look. So when we see someone who's slim and fit and a runner and seems to have it all together, she's more likely to get the job, or he's more likely to get the job.
Absolutely.
Only because of those, despite the fact that there are no skills there.
Right.
So we have to be careful that we don't do it the other way around and assume good things about people when they haven't proven those ideas. We also have to be careful that we don't see beautiful women as stupid or not beautiful women as smart. And glasses don't mean that I know how to do math. There's just like so many of them, and it's in the little details and stuff. And it's a constant battle I fight with my brain.
And that's common.
I'm just going to ask you, okay, I know I didn't ask you this in advance, but can you just get to that slide where you talk about the 6 biases that you reflected on? And while you're doing that, I'm going to just pull out something that Melkeya said, and we can toss that around, but I want to come back to that sheet with the biases. And so Melkeya gave us 6 predictions, and I think we were all sitting back like, man, right. And so I think when we started to really think about it, it started to just really drive me into a place where I realized, like I said earlier, progressive is something I needed to focus on in other areas. So where I think I'm fairly progressive, I may not be as. And so one of the things that she spoke to was look everywhere for talent. We're in a global market. So as an entrepreneur, that says look everywhere for business as well. But look we're in a global market now, just like that. Market's global. And so it's, you know, if you were within regional boundaries, you now have a different level of access. And so, but look everywhere for talent. And so who wants to really chime in on that? And did that resonate for anyone else? Because I know it resonated for me. You know, let us know your thoughts on that. Absolutely.
I work with people who speak second languages. So they speak English as a second language. And people tend to shy away from people who speak with a thick accent. And I work with people to reduce their accents so that it's not distracting. But I do see that if they appear in an interview, Laurel is as an interview in HR, and they have a thick accent, and so they're a little bit nervous about communicating clearly. They're at a disadvantage. Their accent puts them at a disadvantage, even though you might look there for real talent. And it just gets disguised. It's a horrible thing. It's a curtain that they face.
But I see that as a resource now. So as we're thinking about that being a barrier, Rebecca, the services you provide now are a resource that we can consider as well. I see Arquella has the slide. She's going to bring it up for us, but that's a really good point. And that also, you know, attributes to biases as well. But let's really be broaden our thought about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Arquella, whenever you're
Okay.
ready.
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple of things. So when I'm working with recruiters, and a lot of times recruiters are having phone conversations, there is such a thing as voice bias, where people will make a decision based on the way someone sounds. And, you know, there's studies that shows, oh, if someone has a European accent, then they're smarter, right? And so it's really, again, educating people around, again, voice and not making a determination based on the way someone sounds. So that's one thing. The other thing, and going back to Rebecca's point, is that affinity bias. You know, there are employers that will like only go to a couple of schools within Texas. I don't need to say the names. And it's like, there's no other schools but those two schools. And it's like, okay, then that means their workforce is not as diverse as it should be, right? Because they only go to two or one of those schools. And so again, because it's like, oh, they got the ring, this is where they go, they're good, they're in. So again, that goes back to that affinity bias. So again, just being mindful that that's what's going on. And then what is the steps that we can take to say, okay, let's recruit at other schools, let's open it up. So again, we can make sure that we have the representation, and that diversity is the representation. It's the representation of all different folks. On this phone, there's diversity. But then we take it a step further and go, oh my gosh, you know, Kyra has invited us to this party, to this dance, and we can, you know, we're feel included. And, you know, and I've said this, you know, Ebony's probably heard this, you know, Ebony has said, Arquella, you can pick the song at this party, you can speak at this meeting. Now I feel like I have equity. And again, as I said in my presentation, that is the goal for any organization. I think organizations are really reassessing where they are and where they want to go. And unfortunately too, there's, you know, we think about masking and covering, we cover, and Black women in particular will cover. They won't wear the natural hair because again, there's this, you know, they're treated differently. So they will straighten their hair. And so that's masking or covering. You know, people who are in LGBTQ plus community, they will cover, they will mask. You have white men who will mask or cover their religion and their political affiliation, because again, if people feel like they're going to be treated in a certain way, then they're not going to really be their fully authentic selves. And that's why we have these conversations. That's why they're so necessary, to bring this awareness so people can show up and be authentic and be great.
Arquella, and the problem with not being their authentic selves is that's where you lose the talent. The talent is in their authentic self. If you don't give people permission to do that, there's no point in hiring them.
Exactly. Yeah. Show up, be you, right? And people are afraid to do that because again, that's not part of that culture. And once that culture shifts and they're seeing that and they're hearing that, then yes, they can show up. But right now we're just not seeing a lot of that happening.
I'm going to pose a question. And so, Laurel, I might be a little disruptive here, so bear with me, but I'm going to invite you to a conversation that you don't know you're getting ready to have.
Okay.
And I'm going to invite you to a conversation with a young lady that's in one of the squares, the tiles, Brittany Lloyd. She is a young professional. And so, you know, Laurel, there are perceptions around our young professionals, and there are perceptions around their skill set and their talent. Everybody's shaking their head like, kill those perceptions. But what I want to do is invite you and Brittany into this conversation together to really talk about, you know, from a positioning standpoint, and maybe we'll invite Brittany to speak first, that way we'll be able to really address it. But Brittany, as a young professional, what are some of the challenges that you face or that you know are known biases and or a lack of preparation on an employer's part to bring a brilliant mind such as yours in because they didn't design their experience? Like, I kind of want to bring both those conversations together because as you can see, this all flows, right? It's all interconnected. So Brittany, first invite you to that part of the conversation. And then Laurel, if you don't mind tackling her response.
Sure.
I wasn't prepared for this, Kyra. Like, oh, you've been here. Okay, now. Well, so I'm 30 years old. When I first entered into corporate America, I was 20 and a college graduate. I just felt like I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what really to expect, but I knew I had to get in and get a job and do all these things. Something that I seen on the forefront and what determined me becoming an entrepreneur at the age of 25 and walking away from that corporate aspect is training on these biases. Especially, I worked with a lady that it was just a constant clash. There was like a fear of me taking her job, and I'm trying to say, like, we have the same job already. What are you talking about? Like you sound crazy. Like just training and understanding people and training people like myself that are young, that are coming in, what we're to be doing, how to, we all know how to dress in suits and things like that. We all know how to keep our mouths closed and tailor our conversations. But like training on what to expect, how to prepare for the next level, and what goes on in certain environments. More so on like the political aspect of corporate America, we go into that and we have no clue. So it's very overwhelming. And for someone like myself who's very mature, I was not mature in that area, in that realm, where it was like, woo, this is a lot. And like when I first met you, we had a conversation of, and I don't know if this is directly like answering your particular question, but we had a conversation of, and y'all had this conversation at the last meeting too, coming in and being treated a certain way and learning how to just keep your mouth closed, or to saying things, waiting your turn and saying things in a manner that is more accepting. So, excuse my language, but that person looks like the dumb or blah, 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 blah person versus you looking that way, and, you know, the tables are turned. So training individuals on both sides of the spectrum to understand, like, yeah, we're bringing a diverse workforce in, whether they're young, they're minority, they're women, they're men, they're Black, they're Asian, they're whatever the standard or the diversity may be, that's already there with the standard. Also coming in, and this is something I learned like probably 3 or 4 years in, and when I was going to get my master's degree, understanding culture. You don't know that there's a whole culture that's already embedded within this organization. When I left the law firm and I started working at an oil and gas company, I was an executive there. Immediately they were going through a culture shift because there was a new CEO that came in, a new CFO came in, like just new people. And I was there, and in 30 days, there were a whole new 7 executive staff team. And the people that were already in place were just so combative about every little thing, like even down to, I don't want to get a cell phone. I don't want, like, all of these things. And they had to come through my desk to go to my boss's desk. And so it was just training people in my position to understand that there is a culture here. You're not just coming to work and, you know, you're coming in learning things and you're, you know, moving around. And no, there's a culture, and you have to learn that too. That's part of your job. And that's more so part of your job that allows you to be productive than actually getting the hands-on work done. So that.
So Laurel, what's been your coaching around that for leaders that are preparing for new leaders and new
Right.
teams integrating?
This is such a meaty question, and I was actually having a private conversation with someone about this as well. And so let me start by saying, when we look at this and the peanut butter spread of all millennials, anytime you start something with all, there's going to be a problem, because very few things are all or nothing, right? And what I found when I'm coaching people around this topic, and I won't even say it's an issue because I don't think it's an issue, I think it's a topic, is I generally do the coaching intergenerationally as much as I can. So from the standpoint of those folks who are earlier career, because whether it's a millennial or a Gen Z or whatever, earlier career, there is an understanding that I think is important. The first piece of the understanding is that, yes, there is absolutely a culture that's already here. And there's a level of political savvy that is important, so you can understand what you got to do until you can do what you want to do. And until you are actually running things, you're not running things. And that doesn't mean you don't have to be who you are. And that doesn't mean you have to kowtow or be mistreated. That just means there is a way to engage so that you can be heard and you can communicate in a way that's effective. That's number one. Number two, there is a value in what you know because you have grown up in a time where you had much more access to information. It does not necessarily make you better or smarter, but it gives you an ability to generally move faster than some people who didn't have that same timing. It's kind of like that book Outliers. It all depends on when you were born. So number 2 is you do have some advantages that those who are more senior don't have. And then 3, experience is still valuable. Experience still has additional, it's not only valuable, but it has additional value. So when you have those conversations that say, well, wait a minute, I already know how to do this. I've been here 3 years, but this person's been there 20, but I can do that job. It's that whole idea of being one, self-aware, but also being courageous enough to say, let me look at this situation broadly. So yes, the person has been 20 years. I can do that job because I'm doing that job for them anyway. Is that the person or is that the job? That's the first thing, because sometimes that's just a personal issue. That's someone who's decided to retire in place anyway. So it's not about the job, it's about the person. The other thing is, if you look at the job now versus what the job was when the person got into it, there may have been a need for that person to do absolutely everything by hand. They had to do calculations by hand. They had to bring stuff in by hand. There are things that are really critical that now you can push a button. So yes, you can do that job now with 3 years, but that job is not the same job it was 10 years ago. So that's on kind of the early career side. On the more senior career side, it's number 1, you still have value because you have experience. But that doesn't mean you can't continue to learn. And this person who is earlier career has information and knowledge and skills that you don't have and would probably benefit you because your career is not over. And don't be humble enough and courageous enough to ask a question of someone who may have less experience than you, because just because their experience is less doesn't mean it's not valuable. Number 2, just because the person has not been doing it as long as you doesn't mean they don't have skills, period. Because everyone has skills, everyone has talent, and everyone has ability. And then finally, with the person that is more senior, it is that in their career, it is that idea of starting to transition to, I am a leader. Even if I'm not the CEO, the senior VP, but I am a leader. And part of my leadership is the ability to build a team behind me. And my building a team behind me demonstrates more leadership than my desire to hold all the knowledge to me, because that's not a leader. When you are a leader, you are as concerned about the other person's success as you are your own. And so you begin to build more value, a better reputation, more trust, and more engagement when you are willing to bring everyone else along with you and be able to decide, I'm going to share my institutional knowledge because I'm not going to be here till I'm 200. I'm ready to go. And I will probably have a better transition and may even get a bonus and be asked to come back as a consultant if I have been willing to share and engage and bring those up behind me, especially around the ideas of political savvy and engagement, because those are harder than that technical job you're going to do. How to talk to somebody, how to show up in a meeting, when to be quiet, when to say something and how to say it. Those are the things that have finesse to them. And you only learn finesse through time. And there's a reason that they say the hardest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Those scars that we have because we've been working 30 years are battle scars that give us an ability to see something quickly and respond quickly. If you are early career, learn from that. If you are senior career, teach that. That's where we begin to get rid of some of the bias and begin to really build strong teams and strong cultures.
I just feel like maybe we should just have like all the mics in that one moment. Brittany and Laurel, man, thank you guys for like opening that up for us. That was massive. Brittany has another comment, and Pamela, I saw your hand. I don't know if you were saying high five, yes, I agree, or what, but if you have a question after Brittany makes her statement, Pamela, please jump in. Go ahead, Brittany.
I have a question. So in the example that I gave earlier, what do you do when, in fact, they're trying to transition this person out of that job, and that's why they have you doing the same thing? They're trying to transition them into a better situation, and that person's like, I've been here 30 years, and it's a combative situation to completely around. Like, I don't want your job, lady. I'm like, at the time I was 20 years old, and it's like, I don't want your job. We have the same job. They're trying to give you a better job, but you don't. Like, what do you do in those times? Because I'm still young. I'm 30, and I work for myself now. I've been owning a consulting firm for 5 years. But when I have a workforce, I don't want to deal with that where I have a young lady that's been working with me for 5 years, and then I have someone 1 year, and I'm trying to transition her into like taking on more of my roles and transition this one into this place. And then we're in the same predicament that, you know, I faced in my earlier like beginning career. How do you deal with that in that engagement, transition, and all of that. How do you deal with that?
I think,
answer,
go ahead.
Laurel, I'm gonna just tee up Arquella because she does a lot in that world of succession
Yes.
planning and that. So I wanted to like bring both of those pieces in. And if you all have
Sure.
comments, let's bring this in, but let's support the conversation. Okay, so Laurel and then Arquella, and I'm gonna mute.
I think the good thing about that is, number one, knowing when it's about you and when it's not about you. And generally in that situation, that's not about you. And that's because there's been a lack of clarity, there's a lack of trust, and there's a lack of real plan for that other person. And so if you're the person that's kind of being beat up, the best you can do is continue to operate in integrity, right? And do everything that you can and try to build a relationship with that person so that they know it's not you, that their bias is not with you, or their challenge is not with you. Their challenge is with the organization that's decided to make a change. So all you can do is stand in your integrity and be as kind and as clear. Don't let yourself be mistreated. That's not what I mean, but be as kind and as clear as you can, but know in your heart, and you got to be self-aware too, because sometimes we have our own stuff, but know in your heart it's not you. Because in that situation, every time I've seen that situation, every single time, the person who's being transitioned is not clear, doesn't know why, nobody said anything to them. They've just said, oh, by the way, we're not going to have you do this anymore. Go train this other person. And that's not how you treat people. So that's just, Arquella, I know you see it every day too.
Yeah, it's a disservice to employees when we're not setting those expectations, clear expectations. So again, it's, when I'm working with groups, it is, let's be clear. Let's, share the why we're doing it, what's going to happen, how is it going to happen. And a lot of times, because we do have 5 generations working now in the workforce, so 18 to 80. So you can imagine just all of the things that are showing up on a daily basis. And so really for that organization to embrace kind of, hey, here's where we are, here's where we're going. And then here are things that we put in place, and providing the details of why that's happening. What I know about people is that if we understand the why of it and we understand how it's going to happen, we're good, right? But if we are unclear, then we're going to be resistant. We're going to not be on the same page. And so that's what we want to make sure that we get a crystal clear on expectations and what's happening. Even when we're doing succession planning, right? Why are we doing it? What's going to happen with the organization, and starting to prepare leaders. That's why we have the high potential programs, the emerging leader programs, right? To get people prepared for those roles in the future. And so again, it's being a part of that overall process within the organization that aligns with goals and objectives.
Can I add something as an older person? Brittany.
And my mentor, I might add.
You're too kind, Kyra. You contribute to me as well. When I hear your story, what I'm trying to, I understand your perspective, and I've been there as a young person too, moving in. But what I hear is an old woman who has spent 20 years developing what you're learning to do after she's already spent her lifetime setting it up. She is connected to that as if it's her own baby. Really, and it sounds crazy, but the business process that she has developed is her baby. It's like it's her everything, it's her identity. I agree with Arquella and Laurel that she hasn't been instructed about making this change, but I also believe that even if she had been talked to correctly and advised about making this change is probably the most difficult thing your brain can do, even if it's good for you. And crazy as it sounds, we resist good change. We resist all change. Our little brain back there tells us, no, don't change anything, you're doing fine. So to push through that requires an incredible amount of self-awareness. I, as a young person, probably wouldn't have known what to do. Now, as an older person, I would help her make that change. In helping her make that change, she will give me room to step into where she's leaving behind, knowing that I'm going to take care of that too. That I recognize how important this is to her. So I think they both brought it up, Laurel and Paula both, that in taking care of the other person, and they're right, don't let anybody abuse you. Abuse is not allowed. But bad behavior sometimes comes from, I just don't want to go. She sounds like she's just throwing a little temper tantrum and she's just throwing it at you like a small child. I would also suggest that you remember never to become like her. Because I think that that's the worst thing we can do, is that when we engage, like you're saying, it became a battle, you're engaging with her, then you're not doing any better than she's doing. And that's not a criticism of you. It has to do with just human nature. I do it too. I tell Kyra that often. I know how to preach, but I'm practicing as well. I don't know how to do any of this 100%, but I practice it. And by coming to things like this and listening to people talk and listening to young people talk about their challenges, I get to practice it again. So good luck. You sounds like you have the right idea. You're looking for the answers, and that's all it takes.
Well, I want to put my 2 cents in and piggyback off of Brittany, right? From experience. I'm speaking from experience. And so, Brittany, I've been in your shoes several times. I've worked in the corporate industry ever since I was 19 years old. And so now I'm in my 40s. And so here's the deal is that, you know, I've made several mistakes, and I've been in your shoes where as an ambitious, you know, employee in the corporate industry, you know, I kind of fell by the wayside of saying, you know what, I too can do that, right? With someone of experienced employee working 20 years or more in that role. And so, as Laura said, if you step back and think about it, maybe that particular role, and you guys are doing the same thing, maybe this person was the individual who birthed this position, this idea, who build the stepping stones to where you're at, right? And so again, this is their baby, just like you as an entrepreneur, a business owner, that your business is your baby. So you don't want anyone coming in, you know, you're pregnant with that baby. And so first of all, in your business, the first couple of months, that's your baby. You don't tell anyone about the vision, the birth baby that you are about to, you know, create and give and bring out there, right? So you got to protect it. And so unfortunately, you know, some individuals, experienced professionals, that's how they feel. And so you have to respect that. And so the beauty of it is you can look at it twofold. You know what, unfortunately, you know, I know that I'm qualified, but I can also gain and leverage off of this opportunity to gain more, to get more, you know, knowledge, visibility, as well as making sure that you grow. Look at it as a growing opportunity. And so I had to step back and learn that. And it was hard. It was really hard because of my, you know, my personality, my characteristic of being a go-getter, right? I'm like, I know how to do this. I got it. But also I had to look on the flip side to step back, Pam. Why? Because now I can appreciate that mistake I made and I learned from it. Now it's got even better that I've learned much more, and they connected me to the right people. And I was like, wow, what if I would have went a step further and, you know, gave a little attitude or, you know, talk back or begin to take that in a negative way? That could have ruined my relationships, right? Because one of the key things is you have to make sure that you build great relationships, whether it's personal or business. Being able to gain great connections gets you to the next level in life. And so that's just my personal spiel. And, you know, I wanted to share that with you guys. And then the second part that I've noticed in the corporate world, because I'm still in the corporate world 9 to 5, as well as a business owner, one of the issues that I face, Arquella and Laura, is that I've noticed the college new hires coming into the corporate industry versus the experienced employees that have been there long. I noticed that, unfortunately, some corporations focus more on the college students for training and development versus the experience. And I find that to be a problem because I feel like they leave the experienced, you know, employees behind as if we don't want to learn, right? I always leave my glass half full, right? And so that's how I look at things. But sometimes you have upper management, they only want to focus on the new hires, right? Maybe, you know, maybe because they think they have fresh ideas or they're coming in with, you know, new and creative, innovative things. But I also too feel like our experienced employees can do the same, and we're willing to learn, right? We want to continue to learn and develop. So how do you guys feel about that and corporations leaning towards, you know, new hires, college students versus, you know, continue the development for all employees?
So I think Pam is feeding that up to Arquella and to Laurel. And I'll just put the preface here that I see Brittany has her hand up, and then we're just about at our time. So in the best, most brief way to really respond to that, I'll yield it to whichever expert's going to bring that. Arquella.
Thank you, Pamela, for your comment and question. So it just depends on the organization. So a lot of times as they are looking to, I would say, fill a pipeline for those future leaders, future, managers within the organization. So there's more emphasis. I know when I was in energy years ago, we had what's called an associate program, and we would have those from Ivy League colleges come in, and it was all about them, because again, they were considered the future leaders of the organization. But then you have organizations that do have opportunities for those experienced employees to continue to be developed through other leadership programs or professional development, and it's taking advantage of that. But it really depends on the culture and really what their focus is. But the best type of company is able to balance that, where everyone is being developed and it's not just focused on those graduates. Right? And Laura, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
I align with you. In my mind, when they do that, that's that disconnect of people and profit, because they're saying it cost us so much money to get all of them here. We spent all this money to bring them in. We can't lose this money if they leave, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not thinking bigger than that. So I align with everything you said, Arquella.
Balance. Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree. Brittany, did you have a brief response? Oh, you're good. All right, let me just say this. First of all, phenomenal. I think we've all been enriched. Yes, Prashama, I'm joining you with this hand clap to everyone for all the bold contributions. I've been reading the chat as well. To everyone that jumped in, sacrificed an amazing 2 hours of your day to dig in rich in a space that really will grow us all. We all have equity to gain in this space. And so I'm excited that you all made the sacrifice of the time and budgeted your intellect for us today. And I say budgeted because you had to give a portion, and this was an intentional portion that you gave. And so for all of you all, thank you very much. You will receive this recording for certain. And we want to thank our panelists, our experts, Laurel Rutledge, Arquella Hargrove, and Melkeya McDuffie for delivering in such excellence. And thank you all for your significant contributions to today's experience. I am excited. I am, again, Kyra Hardwick. I am the host of the Smart Talk Roundtable. I am thrilled to bring it to you. I'm the founder of the Smart CEO community, the chief strategist of the Kyra company, and also have the pleasure of leading a nonprofit in the nonprofit sector as well with Imagine Excellence. So to share all of that with you all today, you all have made me more rich today, and I hope that everything you gained, to every person that's contributed in the chat as well as live, we thank you. Thank you.